One day I was teaching about this course. This is actually a 4-hour continuing education course for real estate professionals in Texas, Arizona, and California. Right? That's what you're getting today. You just won't get credit for it. Okay? But had this guy in class say, "Well, that's the whole reason you never want to go to Mexico. How could you ever trust that country? You know, they take them back property and they'll swindle you right out of everything you possibly have." And this guy really went off. And I finally, I didn't put up the hand. I gave him the whole elbow. I'm like, "Whoa, slow down." I said, "Sir, where do you live?" He goes, "What do you mean, where do I live?" I said, "Where do you live?" He said, "Well, I live right here in Houston." I said, "Oh, how long have you been here?" "All my life." I said, "Well, okay, so here you're talking about Mexico and its corruption and people cheating one another and committing fraud and doing all this stuff, and you live in the city of Enron?" Y'all haven't forgot about that, have you? Didn't think so.
We're still paying for electricity.
Yeah, it'll take a long time for that to go away, I'm afraid. And now with all the people going to prison. Get my point? Not about a country, not about an ideology, not about politics, about human beings. So, ladies and gentlemen, if it's a helo, it's a helo. You can give somebody money for a helo property. Be prepared not to get it back. And be prepared not to get title to it. When it becomes private, then you can get title to the property. Okay? And some of the most outstanding developments. You're going to go down and you're going to find places, and they're in the process of this privatization. And the deal is they're going to want you to give them money, because when I get private title, oh, it's going to be more expensive. You can roll the dice. It's your money. It's your call. Just understand what you're getting yourself into, right? If it's a helo, it's government owned. When it becomes private, they'll have a title of property that they can convey to you. Yes, ma'am?
How long does that process usually take?
Woo. Minimum 2 years. Depends on how diligent they are, their financial resources, but generally speaking, I mean, some of these helos can take 5 years to regularize. And the thing is that for all the deals that I've seen out there and people work on them, it's just amazing. "Oh, we're very close." They said, "We're 2 weeks." When we were creating our Mexican company, they told us, 2 weeks, 2 weeks. 2 weeks turned into 3 years. It's Mexico. And one of the things that you have to understand and learn about Mexico is that it is the process, and you don't push it, and it doesn't get expedited. And mañana does not mean tomorrow. It means just not today.
Do they do bribing there? In a lot of countries.
Well, why'd you bring that up?
Well, in a lot of countries you have to bribe. If you don't bribe, nothing. I mean, like I'm from Iran.
It's a legitimate question, because we've all heard about the mordida, concept of mordida, right? And does it exist? And has it existed in the past? Absolutely. Are there still ways to expedite some of the processes are going in into? Yeah, it exists. Does it exist to the extent that it did 10 years ago? Absolutely not.
Is it illegal, supposedly?
Yeah, it's illegal. I mean, you're paying a government official or somebody within the registry or, to do it. Now, notarios, no. Because we're going to talk about notarios in just a minute, so that you understand what they do. The public notaries in Mexico. Title companies in Mexico. So, it does exist. All right. Change the dates. 17 to 71. A lot of years go by. Mexico could look north to their neighbor that took half of their nation, basically 100 years earlier, 80 years earlier, and say, "Wow, look at the standard of living that the Americans have. Look at the wealth, look at the opulence, look at the education, look at the benefit they provide to their children."
But Las Vegas.
Why can't we be more like the United States? What do we need to be more like the United States? Well, the answer is real simple, isn't it? Lana. Translated, that means wool. That means money. Okay? Lana. Need the money. We need to get money to flow into our country. Okay? I'm with that. All right? Where's that money going to want to go? Well, naturally, it's going to want to go to the coastlines and to the borders proximity, accessibility, okay? Where the opportunities are, not in the interior, in the Sierras. And oh, by the way, we have a problem, don't we? We have a constitutional prohibition. We don't allow any foreigners whatsoever to own any kind of real estate in our most trusted, prized, treasured areas, the prohibited zone of Mexico. So strategically, acutely, 1971, they created a foreign investment law change and said, you know what? We're going to now allow foreigners to purchase property in the prohibited zone, but under certain provisions. Okay? We're going to have a mechanism called a fideicomiso. Fideicomiso, you see it spelled there. Okay? And under this concept, we're going to allow the foreigners to select property for any intended use anywhere within this constitutionally protected land area, and as long as the title is vested with a federally chartered Mexican bank, that Mexican bank will initiate and establish a 30-year beneficiary interest, a trust, for the foreign purchaser. And it's the equivalent of fee simple title. You can own it, you can will it, you can subdivide it, you can mortgage it, you can encumber it, you can develop it, subdivide, whatever you want to do. It's your property for 30 years. Excuse me. Now, this was a dramatic change in their constitutional law, was it not? All of a sudden they're saying, okay, foreigners, we're giving you an opportunity here, but where was the drawback in the concept?
30 years.
30 years. I mean, think about it. We don't even own our houses for 30 years here in the United States. We've got a 30-year mortgage. So there are a lot of foreigners that are saying, you know what, how can I go and invest millions of dollars in a development or a facility, and at the end you're telling me I've got to extinguish the trust, there's no carryover, can't have a straw man, have to liquidate the trust, extinguish the trust. What happens if I can't get out of it? How do I know I'm not going to lose money? Da 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 da. So the concept in theory was very good and viable, but the 30 years was a detriment, right? So 1989, again, strategically and acutely, the Mexican government says, oh, got a problem. So they created an extension, a renewal of the basic 30-year trust for another 30 years. So now, foreign investment had 30 years plus 30 years, anywhere for any intended use within the, quote, restricted zone of Mexico. No longer prohibited, it was now restricted. Restricted that you had to use the trust, you had to create the fideicomiso. Now, I want to make sure that you understand what this is, because this is how every one of us owns residential property today in the restricted zone of Mexico. Okay, make no mistake of that. 2007, this still exists. I'm going to tell you how it's changed a little bit, but it still exists today. All right? The fideicomiso is not a deed. The fideicomiso is a concept. A concept. And in this concept, you have the seller, a buyer, and a bank acting as trustee. And whether GMAC is providing financing on this deal, that doesn't change. Okay? GMAC uses the fideicomiso to lend on the residential property. Okay? So under this concept of the fideicomiso, you have the seller, okay, the fideicomitente, you have the buyer or borrower, who is the fideicomisario, the beneficiary, and then you have the trustee, the fiduciary, but he's called the trustee in this concept. So it's three parties, and they're all in the escritura publica, that public deed, right? What changes in a finance scenario